All right, so today I want to talk about how we can use Postman to create dynamic scripts that allow us to test an API. So we can have a collection of a whole bunch of different tests that we run in an automated process. So for this, I've built an API. The link to this repo is down in the description. You can download it. This is the API itself. This isn't the testing script. This is the API. Once you've cloned this, you have a copy of it on your computer, you can run npm run dev. This command is going to run the API, so it's going to be running in the background, and then we can use Postman to test this API. So the routes that are going to be available to you are going to be a GET request to just the base URL over port 3000. This is just a health check endpoint. So we want to be able to test and see, hey, is the thing up and running? And two different responses we could get from this. One is if we include an XAPI key. Let me zoom in here a little bit for you. If we include a header called XAPI key with this value, we're going to say, oh, hey, the API key was provided with this thing, and we're going to get this response, this JSON response, status good to go. If we don't include that key, this is the response that we get. So there's going to be an error object with a code 999. Now, this is the only endpoint that I've currently set up inside of the API with the check for this API key, but it's something that you could modify the code very easily to have it tested on every single request. Okay, for registering a user, there's an endpoint. We do a post to API users register. We send some JSON in, and it's going to send us back a response with an ID email for the new person who was created. Then we can log in. So a post to a different endpoint, instead of users register, it's users tokens. Send in an email and password, and it should send us back a token or an error, but we should get a token, and this token string is what we're going to need to put in the header as the authentication value, the authentication header value for all of the other requests. So there is get API movies. This is going to give us a list of all the movies that belong to the user with whatever person you're logged in as. That ID, that's the person's user ID. And wherever this matches, you're going to get all of the movies. If you want to get a specific movie, you can pass in a movie ID. Again, it has to match for the user, but you'll get one specific movie. You want to create a new movie? We can do that. It will automatically be added to the account for the current user, and we can delete a movie. So with the delete method, API movies, and then pass in the ID, and then we're going to get a message back with that ID, and I believe there's also a message. It just says deleted successfully. Error responses. So if anything fails, we should get back an HTTP status of 400 with an error object that looks like this. So error, and inside of it there's a code and a message. The one exception to this is there could be a 401 error if you don't have the authentication header. If you don't have the right token, you're going to get a 401 error. Okay, so that is the API, and like I said, the link to this is in the description. You can download that and have a copy of it. So let's jump into Postman and have a look. All right, so I have it up and running. My API is running right now. And if I make a request to the health check endpoint, there it is. It's failing because I don't have that header. I've got another one that I set up, a get to that endpoint. So doing this yourself, you can just use the plus sign to add more and more tabs. And then you can copy and paste from the README file into here. This is the endpoint. Choose the method. We're doing get. And here you can see under the headers tab, I've added the API key with that string. And if I do that, this is the response that I want to get. So I just want to quickly show you that I have all these set up. So there's post, a post method to API users register. I'm creating a new user account. When I do that, there we go. This is the error message because that one already existed. So I got a 400 bad request and the error message because I'm trying to create a user with the same email address, one that's already been used. If I change this, if I put Steve1 and I send. That's going to work. I'm going to get a new user because the email address is different. Now this highlights a problem that you have with automated testing. If I hard code each one of these things and I try to run it, there's an issue where I'm having to copy and paste things from one screen to the next. So if I have to take my user ID or the email address or the password and copy it into the next test for users tokens, which is my login, I need to be able to copy from one to the next. I also have an issue where if I want to create a whole bunch of these, I don't necessarily want to have to come up with a whole bunch of different email addresses or a whole bunch of passwords and manually add them to all these screens. I want my scripts to be able to generate some of this data for me. And that's what these other tabs are going to be here. Pre-request, request script. This one allows us to generate variables, generate data that we can then use inside the headers or the body. The tests, this is after I've sent a request and I've got a response back. So I've got a response like this. I can write a script inside of tests that's going to say, what was the status of the thing that came back? Or in the data that came back, is there something with a property underscore ID? So we can test things like that using these. So we've got register, we've got the login, then I've got one for get to get the list of movies where the owner matches the ID. I can get a specific movie, but again, I've got the issue where did I get this ID from? Well, when I did this, there was one for my current user. I could do that. Or when I create one with my post, I'm getting an ID here. Well, I can come back and use that here. So if I did this script after this one, just for example, here we've created a new movie. Here, I want to get the details about the one that I just created, but I need to get the ID from here to use in the next script. For delete, same thing. I need to have an ID from one of my posts where I created these things. All right, so that's the process that we're trying to build with our automated scripts. Now, you can just create all the tabs, set everything up, hard code the values in for your body if you're sending. So if I look at my post here, in the body, I selected raw and JSON for the data, and then I could write out the JSON here. So how do we automate this? Instead of just creating all these tabs, well, what we do is over here at the side, collections, we create a collection. I created one here called User Movie Tests Demo. This collection can have folders inside of it if we want. If we wanted to group certain tests together, we could do that. Or I can just have the collection and list them all here. And then I can play with the order of these things to say, this is the sequence I want to use. Now, with this set up, with this collection created, I can come over here to the environment window. I can look and see, okay, I've got no variables created yet, but we're going to create some variables. I'm going to click on the little gear icon here, and I'm going to add a brand new environment. Let's call this movie user dev. Okay, I've just created an environment. I'm going to close this window, and I'm going to choose that. So environment, it's kind of like with Node, you can create environment variables. We can, in Postman, create variables that have lots of different scopes, including environment ones. So I'm going to use this collection together with variables that I set up in this environment for my scripts. That token that I needed. Here, all of these movie requests that I'm making, all those different endpoints, they all needed to have a header where the name is authorization and then the value is the word bearer, a space, and then this big long token. I want to be able to take that token from a variable. So I'm going to come up into here and I'm going to create inside of here, I'm going to create inside of this movie user dev environment a variable. So I can click on edit there, or the other way we can do is click on the gear. Here's the movie user dev. I can click on that and I'm into that environment. Here's where we create the variables. So I'm going to create one called token. And, You can put anything in as the initial value. If it's something that's a constant that never changes, you can stick it right in here. But we can dynamically set this value inside of our scripts, which is what we're going to do after the login. We're going to put a value into here. All right, so I'll update that. Now I have a variable called token inside of this environment, and inside of here, I'm going to replace all that with my token variable, just like that. And we're going to be able to use variables with these double curly braces around them throughout, inside of our scripts, inside the body, inside the headers, or up here in the location bar. So things like, hey, I just created a brand new movie. I'm going to take this value, stick it in a variable so I can use it in my next request, in my next endpoint. That's going to be part of my URL. Okay, so let's put these together. Let's save all of them inside of our collection over here, and let's save them in a specific order. So get, I will save. What am I going to call it? Well, I could leave it as that, but I'm just going to say get health check fail. So this is a test where I'm actually wanting it to fail. And this is the collection that I'm putting it inside of, down here at the bottom. Save. There we go. I now have one that's saved. Get health check fail. I do want this one to fail. I want to get this response. I want to get the 401 unauthorized. My next one, again, I'll save it. This is my health check pass. Now you can call them anything that you want. After you've saved the first one, they're automatically going to go into the last collection that you used. So I'm just going to very quickly run through all these and save them, giving them names. Okay, so we have all of these saved inside of here. And if I wanted to run them now without putting my actual variables into here, just using the data that I've hard-coded in here, I can go here to the collection, click on the little arrow to open this up, and then we click on Run. That's going to open up our collection runner window. And down here at the bottom, I click on this Run. It's going to run through all of these. Now, I don't have any tests, so it's just going to run through and it's going to make the requests one after another after another. There we go. So I got responses for all of them. That's why I'm getting 0 pass, 0 failed. There's nothing went wrong. It was able to do all of these things, which meant that my server was actually up and running, but I haven't added any scripts to do the testing. But this is what we're going to do once we've added our tests, is just quickly run through all of this. Okay, so let's start putting variables into places here. So our first one, get the fail. Inside of tests, we're going to use this command, pm postman.test. This is the method, and it takes 2 parameters. The first one is, what's the name of the test that you're running? So we'll say health check should fail. And then I have a function here. So I'm going to be running this function right here to do the test. So pm response, this is my response object that's coming back from the server to have status. And then for this one, I want a 401. Here, I'm going to use just regular functions here. I haven't tested it with arrow functions to see if those work in here, but there we have it. I'm going to save this. So now I have one test inside of here on this request. We're going to go back, run this again. And right up here at the top, we see 1 passed. So health check should fail. That's the name that I gave to it inside of that script. And we get the green. It worked. We did get a 401 response. Perfect. That's what we wanted to get. So that is our first successful test. I'm going to copy this just to make it a little bit faster. Health check pass, test, inside of here, this one should have a status 200. There we go. Now I've got two tests. I'm going to save this one, come back, and we don't have to close this window every time. Now, you may have seen a little error that popped up at the bottom there saying it was having trouble communicating. That's because I ran the test the first time with those hard-coded values, and then the second time I'm running it, the first attempt was, or one of those attempts was using that variable token, and I had just made the default value, I think it was ABCD. So that's likely the cause of this. So here's my API running, and we can see, yeah, JWT malformed. There's the error. So that's what happened. So I'm just going to quit this and I'm going to start it again. There we go. We'll get rid of this error once we fix things. Now, we can create folders and just run individual folders. By default, when we run this, the test will run through in the order that we have here, or when I open it up inside of this window. We can play with the order over here. I can click on these and rearrange the order. So if I want the health check pass to come first and then the health check fail, we could do that. Or we can put a little command in there. It's postman.setNextRequest, and then you give the name of the next one, like these names. So I could make it jump back and forth. Most of the time, however, you just want it in the order that you've got here. Okay, so I'll run that. There we go. And one of those, there it is, 500. That's the one that had that token. So I know it's failing on that point right now. But health check should fail. And, oh, they're both with that same name. I'll have to change the name so it shows up properly. But there's the 200, there's the 401. These ones both worked. So I have a working test. Two of them passed. All right, and health check pass. Health check should pass. That's what this test is going to be. So we'll save that. Good. All right, so we've got our health check routes. I'm just going to close these to clear up some of the mess. Now inside of here, for the registering users, maybe I don't want to register just one user. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the value here. I'm going to make it Steve dot and then some number, and I'm going to change that number. I'm going to grab the current time and use a timestamp as part of the email address. And that way I can avoid having duplicate values. Pre-request script, this is where we want to do it. So this is where we create variables that can be used in the body or the headers. Let's say I'm going to create one called date. Do date.now, and I'll create a variable called email that I'm going to use. And we'll say this is going to be equal to the string Steve, and then date, that long number, and then at, we can just put anything in here we want, themovies.org. If there was some requirement that you had for your code, you could do that here. You could, maybe you wanted Gmail addresses sometimes and other times not, or sometimes you wanted invalid ones and you wanted to test that. Well, you could do that here. You could dynamically create some that worked and some that didn't. Okay, so PM, Postman, environment set. I am basically dynamically creating a variable inside of this environment with this value, this name, and this value. Now I can use this as a variable. So we can come back to the body, and here, instead of having a hard-coded string, I'm going to put this. So user email, that variable is going to be placed inside of the string as the body that's being sent to the server. Okay, so let's save that. So that's our body. That's the email variable. So I now know that every time I create this, I don't have to worry about there being already a duplicate value inside of there. Maybe I want to test for that with one of my scripts, but for now, I just want it to work. Headers, there's nothing that we need. We don't need this authorization one for the register. We don't need it for the login. We just need it for the movie stuff. So nothing needed there. There's our body with the variable pre-request. And then the test, this is the one when it comes back. Test, created user. There we go. Now what do we want to test? Well, for a post request, what we should be getting, you can see down here, here's a sample response, a 201 status. That's what we want. So that's just what I'm going to check here. I'm going to keep this simple. We'll say PM response, my response object, to have status 201. Okay, save that. Great. So we've got a pre-request to create the value, which is being used in the body, and then a test that's running afterwards to validate it. There's our first three. Login, we're going to do the same sort of thing. So we are going to send this in. Now, when I log in, I want to use the variable that I created back here. So this user email variable, that's what I want to use for the login. So here, we'll delete that. There we go. I'm just using the same password. You can dynamically create passwords or change them as well. Create another variable for that if you want. Pre-request, nothing I need to do because this variable was created on the previous screen and it's an environment variable, which means I can use it from both scripts. And then my test after the fact. Okay, here we can say logged in. It had a status of 200. And I also want to know, was there a token? So let's do another test for that. We can do multiple tests. Has a token. So we're going to use a JSON method on the response. This is going to take the response, what we have down here, and it's going to say, this thing should be a JSON string, so I want the actual data property that is inside of here. So that's what this is going to be. We're going to use this method to feed into our variable right here, data, and then I want to know if data.token exists. Something along the lines of that. This is what we're going to test. So we can return that. There we go. We save that. Now, what I want to test here is just these first four. So I can actually turn these ones off and run our test that way. There we go. So there's our tests. The health checks both worked. We were able to create a user. We got the 201 status. Logged in mean we got a 200 status, and we have a token. So tests are working so far. This is great. Now that token that we have in data, this is the thing that we want to take and we want to put that into the environment variables. There we go. Now I have a token that I can use for the rest of my requests. In the next one, in the headers, this bearer token that we looked at earlier, that will be this variable. And I'm just going to quickly jump and add it to the others. Okay, so we have user being registered, logged in. We can now get all the movies belonging to the owner. The owner, that's being taken care of by the fact that the user ID is actually being embedded in that token. So when we send it back to the server, it's able to look at the token, get the user ID, and it knows who the owner is. Okay, create movie. Inside the body. Now here, owner. I don't know who the owner is going to be. I need to know. Now I've got the token saved as a variable, but I don't have the user. So I can go back to when we're registering, and the response that we get back from this is going to have an email and an ID. So when we register the user, this is the register user 1. So in my tests, in addition to just checking that, what I want to do is I want to take the ID from that data and save that as a variable called user1. And there it is. So this ID property that's inside of data, that's going to be the ID of the user that we just registered. Now I've got that saved. Now I can use this variable here when I'm starting to insert the movies. There. Now I've got a variable. I've got a variable that I'm using in the header with the token, and in the body, whoever that first user was that I registered, I don't need to change the title of the movie and the year, but I can dynamically put in the correct user. Whoever I just created and logged in with, that is who I'm going to be using to create new movies. So I'll save that. This one's working. Get specific movie ID. All right. Well, in our tests, we're going to test to make sure that we get a 201 status back. Same as with the register here. I'm going to copy that over into here. So where we're creating the movie for user 1, I'm going to do a test to make sure that I've got the status 201. So this is created movie for user 1. 201 status, yes, great. But I also want to get the data out of there, and from that, I want the movie 1, user 1. Again, it's going to be an ID property from there, but I'm going to save that. So then this can be used in my next script, which was get the one that was just created. There we go. Now here's a variable being used up inside of here. Now, it's sort of a good practice at this point. If you're going to do this, like you can see, I get this unresolved variable. Hey, it's not defined. Well, I know that I created it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I've got user email. I know I'm going to create a variable called user1. I don't have to provide an initial value for it. I'm going to have a movie1, u1, and then additional ones. Let's say I was going to write multiple scripts. I could say, okay, yeah, there's going to be a user 2. There's going to be a movie 2 for user 1. And then I'm going to have a movie 1 for user 2, and so on. So we can just create all these variables that we need, that we want to use, that we're going to be using in the future. We can give them initial values if we want. And you can see that Postman keeps track of, hey, this is the current value. That's the last value that was used here. So that's updated, closed. Now, there we go. We get the green. It's not showing up red anymore. So we know that we've got that in our environment. For this test, let's just look for that status 200. There we are. And for the delete, it's a status 200, and we can look for an ID in there if we wanted. We can look for a message property if we wanted. We do need a variable here. So once again, we'll use that movie one that we know exists. So there's that, and then in my test, well, I'll do the same thing as my get. Copy that over into the delete. All right, so we got a 200 status for that one. All right, we'll save that. We've got no dots here. Everything's been saved. So the sequence is we're going to check the status of the server with and without the API key. We're going to create a new user, save that person's user ID as in a variable. Then we're going to log the person in using that saved variable. We're going to get back a token, save the token, and then we're going to use the token for movies, creating a movie, getting a specific movie, and we could move this down here as well. We can get all movies. After we create one, we'll get all the movies for that user, get a specific one, and then delete that one. If you want to create a whole bunch, let's say I'm going to create a whole bunch of movies here. I can duplicate that. So you can right click and do this, or in the little menu right here, you can duplicate as well. And then we can rename it movie 2 for user 1. There we are. It's going to have this in here because we duplicated it and just changed the name. It's got the same token. The body is the same, so this we do need to change. Let's put something else in here. Wally 2008, pretty sure. User 1, yes, we're going to say it's the same one. Tests, created second movie for user 1, and movie 2, user 1. We're going to stick it into that variable. And then I'm going to get all the movies again after I do the delete. So move that down to the bottom and get all movies user 1 again. Tests. We don't have a test. We can check for that status. There we are. Okay, so let's jump into the list. So we're going to check the status, register a user, log in a user, create 2 movies, get the list with both movies, get one of those movies, the first one created, delete the first one, and then list them all again, so we should be back to only seeing the second movie here. All right, and let's try it out. There we go, 11 passed tests, 0 failed. And the ones that stick out to the left, these are the routes, and the ones that are slightly inset, these are the tests. Logged in, has a token, created a movie, created second movie, got a specific movie. Oh, we should change the text on that one. And that one for the get all movies and the deletes. And you can run this test again and again and again. Because we're using those variables and automatically incrementing them, we know that these things are all working. So I'll just change those names. And there we are. So if you want a copy of this, I can actually do an export here. I can export this. So I will export a copy of this, and I'll leave a link to it. I'll post that as a code gist, and then you can download that as well. I will have the link to that, or I'll just add it to the repo, and then you can download that and experiment with it as well. So that is your introduction to testing and writing scripts with Postman to test your APIs and make sure that things are working. So there's a lot more that you can do with them. There's a lot more things. You can definitely make bigger tests, things that are a lot more complex. They do provide some snippets right here, and the documentation from Postman is pretty good as well. They've got a lot of things that you can do inside there too. So hopefully that helps you out. If you have questions, if you got stuck on any of the tests that I did here specifically, please feel free to post them down in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.